Alright, this video is on simple time, and we're going to start by looking at different types of notes and rests. So in the videos before this one, I talked about how to pitch a song and that kind of thing. And pitching a song has to do with the highness or lowness of the notes. That's pitch. Well, another aspect of reading music or leading singing is how long do you hold the notes? The rhythm part of it. So that's what this has to do with. So first we'll look at different types of notes. So notice in this column we have different types of notes. This column we have rests. So the notes, you sing when you have a note, you don't sing when you have a rest. Okay? The time value is going to be the same for each. Alright, so the first one up here, this would be a whole note, and that's what a whole rest would look like. So a whole note would be an open note without a stem. Now, again, our music normally has shapes to the notes. They're shape notes. So you can have any of these could have a shape to the note head. But as far as the rhythm goes, it just depends on if the note is open and does not have a stem, it is a whole note. And then if you add a stem to the note, you have a half note. If you fill the note in, you have a quarter note. You add a one flag, you have an eighth note, two flags, a 16th note. And you could even go lower than that. If you add another flag, you could have a 32nd note. Add a fourth flag, you could have a 64th note, so on and so forth. And then the rest, this is what the rests look like. A whole note, a half note would be half the value of the whole note. The quarter note would be half the value of the half note, or the length of the half note. Eighth would be half of the quarter note as far as length goes. 16th would be half of the eighth note. So each time they go down a half. A quarter would be a fourth of a whole. An eighth would be an eighth of a whole. 16th, a 16th of the whole. So that's kind of how it works. Okay. Now, one thing I will say, quarter rest. Most of the music nowadays, the quarter rest looks like this one. But if you do look at an older hymn book, the quarter rest in some books looks like that. Okay, so and I think I have one in the slides here where the quarter rest looks like that one. But either of these two is a quarter rest. Now you can also add dots to notes. Sometimes you have dotted notes. And the first four up here, I've just taken each of the kind of notes, put a dot with it. Alright, so when the dot is beside a note, a dot will add half of that note's value back to it. So if it's a dotted whole note, then that's the same as a whole note and a half note added together. A dotted half note would be the same as a half note and a quarter note added together. A dotted quarter would be the same as a quarter and an eighth added together. And a 16th would be an eighth dotted eighth would be the same as an eighth and a 16th added together. Okay. Now occasionally we do also have double dotted notes. All right. So double dots, two dots will first add half of the note's value back to it, and then it will add half of that one back to it. So if it's a double dotted whole note, you'd have the same as a whole note plus a half note plus a quarter. If you have a double dotted half note, you would have a half note plus a quarter plus half of that, which would be an eighth. A double dotted quarter, you'd have the same as a quarter plus an eighth plus a 16th. Okay. Now, how many beats does each of the notes get? Okay, well, that leads us to time signatures, which is really the main thing that we want to look at today is time signatures and how to direct these if you're directing singing. Okay, So time signatures appear at the beginning of each song and anywhere in the song where the time may change. So sometimes in songs, after you get going, the time may change. The time signature may change. Well, then that'll show up whenever that happens. So look at a couple of songs here. Here's one. We make these a little bigger. All right, there's your time signature right there at the beginning. Let me change this. Alright, so there's your time signature there. Okay, and then same here. Alright, you got two numbers, one on top of the other one. Alright, every song should have a time signature at the beginning. Okay, there's one there. While I'm on this song, here's an example of the quarter rest the old way of drawing the quarter rest. So you do see those some still in older books. There's a time signature there. So there are your time signatures. Okay, so today we're just going to look at three: the 2/4, 3/4, and the 4/4. Most those are considered to be simple time. And in the next video after this one, I'll talk more about what simple time, what that really means. Now, in the time signature, the top number tells us how many beats that we have per measure. Okay, bottom number tells me which note gets one beat. Okay, now the top number in theory can be anything. So it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, you know. Now, the church music that we sing, normally that top number will only be a 2, a 3, a 4, or a 6, a 9, or a 12. And that's pretty much it. Occasionally, I think there's one song in one of our books that may be in a 5/4. Top number's a 5. You can have some irregular times like that in classical music. But in hymns, with hymns and church music, normally, again, the top numbers are just going to be 2, 3, 4, or 6, 9, or 12. The bottom number, which tells us which note gets one beat, can only be a 1, a 2, a 4, an 8, a 16, a 32, a 64, a 128, so on and so forth. Okay, now normally we are only going to see a 2, a 4, or an 8 for the bottom number in the time signature. Okay, so how do I tell what that 1, 2, 4, 8, 16 means as far as time goes? Well, if it's a 1, go back up here, then 1/1. If a 1 is in the bottom, then that means the whole note gets one beat. If the 2 is in the bottom, half note gets one beat. If the 4 is in the bottom, quarter note gets one beat. 8th in the bottom, an 8th gets a beat. Okay. Now, we will get a little more technical about really what's happening with the beat when we talk about simple and compound time together. But for now, that's what we'll say as far as the beats go. So the bottom number tells you which note gets one beat. Top number tells how many beats per measure. So if your time signature is 2/4, then the quarter note would get one beat, and 2 beats per measure means you would have the equivalent of 2 quarter notes per measure. All right. If it's 3/4, you would have the equivalent of 3 quarter notes per measure. If the top number is a 4, you'd have the equivalent of 4 quarter notes per measure. Okay. Now again, these 3 time signatures are all that we're going to look at in this video. So the bottom number is a 4 in all 3 of these. Okay. So if I go up here, that means the quarter note will get one beat. So quarter note gets one beat. All right. Then an 8th note, then an 8th is a half of a quarter. So that means if I see an 8th note or an 8th rest, that will get half of a beat. 16th would be half of that. That would get a quarter of a beat. Okay. If a quarter note gets 1 beat, a half note would be double that. That would get 2 beats. And then the whole note, which is double a half note, would get 4 beats. So this would be the number of beats per measure for these time signatures. Okay. All right, so let's look at a few songs here. I'm just going to take a couple of them, and let's look at the measures and count the beats that's in the measures. Let's see. Let's make this just a little bit bigger. All right. All right. So I'm going to do two things. I want to count. Show the count on each of the notes, and then I want to show you where the beats fall. Okay, so I'm going to use two different colors for that. I'm going to use red for how many beats each one gets, and then underneath it I'm going to show in another color where the beats fall. Okay, so now earlier I did say beats per measure. All right, all these little lines here are called measure bars. Okay, there's one there, there's one there, there's one there. All right, so between each of those is a measure. Okay, there should be equivalent to 4 quarter notes or 4 beats per measure. Now notice at the end you have a double bar line, so that shows the end of the piece. Now, on some songs, normally, you're going in this case you're going to have 4 beats per measure. All right. Sometimes the first measure and the last measure do not have that many. All right. So let's find one here that doesn't. All right. This one, for instance. All right. The time signature is 3/4. Okay, well notice the first measure only has 1 quarter note, which is just 1 beat. Okay, well, so that one is not a complete first measure. All right, but what you can do is take that first note, that first measure, if you add that to the last measure, so notice here I've got 1, 1/2, 1/2, so that adds up to be 2. If I add that together with the first measure, whoops. If I add that with the first measure, then it does add up to be 3. So the first measure, if the first measure is not a complete measure, then the first and last measure added together, if the music is written correctly, should add up to be the number of beats per measure, which in this case would be 3 on this song. Okay. Now all these songs that we have to start with here that we're looking at, they all have complete first measures. Okay, so I'm going to go through here. I'm going to write down, show. Okay, so a quarter notes get 1 beat. So I'm going to go 1 beat, 1 beat, 1 beat, 1 beat. I'm going to erase this here. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Those all add up to be 4. 1, 1, 2. All right, half note gets 2 beats, so 1, 1, and 2 is 4. Here's a half, a half, a half, a half, 1, 1. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 2 and 2 add up to be 4. So between each measure bar, notice the number of beats. When I add those up for the notes, they add up to be 4. Okay. So the top number tells me how many beats per measure. All right. Now, where do the beats fall? Okay. Well, this would be beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. And then here that would be beat 1, beat 2, beat 3 would be when you first say the word sin, you hold it out through beat 4. Here you would have beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. Here you would have beat 1 and 2. So hold G on 1 and 2, and then thus would be beat 3 and 4. Okay. Now this whole rest of this song is this whole second line. You would do the exact same thing if we continue doing this. Okay. Chorus would be a little different there, but that's how that works. Okay. Now let's see. Let's go on down. Now this one has a few dotted rhythms in it. Okay, so let's do this one real quick. All right, so this is a quarter note, 1 beat. That's a quarter note, 1 beat. This is a dotted eighth, so that'd be a half a beat plus a quarter. All right, so a half plus a quarter would actually be 3/4. That would be a quarter, and then you got 1 there. So if you add up 1 plus 1 plus 3/4 plus 1/4 plus 1, that does add up to be 4. Okay. And then the same thing here, and the same thing here. Now where your beats would fall on that one, this would be beat 1, this would be beat 2, that would be 3, and then that would be beat 4. Okay. Now the only other thing I'm going to show you as far as the time goes, I did put this one in here because this is an example where you've got some double dotted notes. Okay, this is 4/4. So the rest of these are the same. Now so first let me show you this. All right, so here's an example of where you do have some double dotted notes. Okay. So if it's a double dotted note, then that means it's the same as a half note plus a quarter plus an eighth. All right. So this would be 2 plus 1 plus a half. So that would be 3.5 beats. And then you've got 1/2 left there. So 3.5 plus a half does give you 4 beats for that measure. Okay. So again, you do see the double dots sometime. That's how they work. Now, one other thing on this one, and then we'll look at how to conduct these, how to beat the time. These little bars up here. All right. Well, notice this. The word heavens is 1 syllable, I guess. Is 1 syllable, right? So one way that this is notated as far as the notation goes is when you've got either 8th notes or 16th notes or some notes that have flags, that have the flags, then to connect those they just do a bar like this on the top. So on heavens, this would be one word where you'd put the two together, like a tie. If you were going to do that with these two quarter notes here, say that these two you were going to put together with one word, then you would do a tie like that to put the two together. If they're 8th notes or some notes that have the bars on them, the flags on them, then you can put them together by connecting the bars. So these two are 8th notes, these two are 8th notes. So if I were going to add these up, this would get a half a beat, a half a beat, a half a beat, a half a beat, a whole beat, and a whole beat, and that would add up to be the 4 there.